Hey there. So we're working on our next project now, which is going to be a brooch. And I've already got the template cut out here and glued onto our fabric stabilizer. So you can have a look at what we're going to be working with here. Right, so we've got our butterfly in the center, which you can see. Then out of the bottom, we've got a flower, kind of half sticking out. And then obviously out of the top, we've got another flower sticking out of the top. So here's our project. It's going to be a brooch, and we're going to start working on that. So next we'll get our needle threaded, and we'll basically get up and running, and we'll start outlining this. I'll kind of guide you through that process. All right? Okay, so here we go. We're going to get threading our needle. We always take, I call it an arm's width of a fishing line. That's what we're going to take, or I guess our thread here, our trusty dental floss, which works really well, being that it's already waxed, and it keeps the piece nice and sturdy and keeps your beads from rattling around. So you take your dental floss, you orient it so that it's vertical, right? Dental floss is flat. Make it so that it's straight up and down. That way it matches the orientation of your eye of your needle. You pull it through, and you want one half of your thread, about one half of it there, but to come halfway down the length of your piece, right? So you're going to have a short end, you're going to have a long end. Your short end remains open, and your long end, you're going to throw in a surgeon's knot, where we do 1, 2, 3 passes through of a regular knot. So you end up with something like this. It's like you're going to make your plain Jane old knot, but you just keep going around 1, 2, 3 times. That's called the surgeon's knot. And then when you pull it together, you end up with a triple knot all in one place right together. You don't have to try and line them up, which is an absolute pain. You can trim off the end so that there's just a tiny bit sticking through. And then you've got a long end with your surgeon's knot and a short end. That's your escape route. So if you make a mistake, you can back your needle off, you can back beads off, retrace your steps, and then fix your mistake again. So this is your safety net, right? That short open end. Otherwise, we're going to be starting by outlining our butterfly. So we're going to do that first. And for that, we've got this really nice, deep, kind of shiny blue that we're going to be using here. So I'm going to scoop out a little bit of that. And that's what we're going to be outlining our piece with. And of course, we're going to be outlining our butterfly first. So I'm going to start where one of those wings meets the body. And you're going to come up from underneath your piece. So I'm going to stick out right where the wing meets a body, pull all my thread through. Now I'm sticking out the top of my piece, right, with my thread. We'll start with 3 beads at a time. So I just scooped up 3, and that's what we're going to use to start. Eventually, though, as you practice, you'll realize I can only fit 2 beads, or really it's 4 beads that'll finish this line. I'll just do all 4 at once. You can do up to 5 or 6 or even more beads per go once you get comfortable with it, but 3 is a pretty reasonable number if you just want to be beading along at a good pace. So you slide those all the way down, and you want to set this up. I hold it like this, where one hand I've got my needle in, the other hand I've got it like so. And what this lets me do is it lets me steer my beads. You can see I can steer them around. So I'll set them right on their line, right where they need to be, right, just like that, because I'm going around this piece of the wing. So I line them up, tuck them if you need to, so that they're exactly where you want them, right side by side on your line. And then you do your first little tack down, which you go down through your stabilizer and your template right after your last bead. Okay? and I pull that all the way through, all the slack through, and then what you'll be left with, if I can get this to adjust for me, the focus is terrible here, but essentially I've got my 3 beads that are all laid down side by side on the line, right? I'm following this line around. Now what you got to do is the next part of your beading process, which is to pop back up in between beads 1 and 2 on the line that you want to be on. So I just popped back up in between beads 1 and 2. We'll see again if I can get this to focus. If not, you'll just have to get the drift. So I've come up between beads 1 and 2. I pull all that slack through. So now I'm in between the 2 beads I started with, up at the top. And then your final step is to go through the remaining beads. So whatever they are that you have left to go through. For me, I put down 2 beads, or sorry, I put down 3 beads, which means I'm going through 2. Then at that end of that little piece, you can give it a thumb roll, tug along as well, just to tighten it up. And then you've got your 3 beads on the line, looking good, right? Then I can pick up another 3 beads, let's say. So I pick up my beads, right? I've got 1, 2, 3. Again, you can do more if you're comfortable with that. And then again, I'll quickly move you through that, right? So one hand's got my needle, the other hand has my piece, right? So I can have one in each hand. I use my thumb to kind of organize and steer the beads right on the line, which is where I want them, like that. So now I've got them right on the line. And then I'm gonna tack down right on the line so that it's nice and straight, right? I just went down on that line, pull all my thread through. Right, there's my 6 beads laying together on the line, right, which is what we want. But now I need to finish this by going up from underneath between my first and second beads that I just put down. So if you tack down 3, you come up between 1 and 2. Even if you tack down 6 beads, you still pop up between 1 and 2. So it takes a couple stabs to get that from underneath right on your line. There you go. Popped up in between my first and second bead. And then my final step is to go through the remaining beads, right? I'm going literally right through them. And then pull the rest of my slack through. Always give a little thumb roll and a little tug at the end. That keeps everything nice and sturdy. And then there I have it. There's 6 beads in a row on my line. And I'm just working around this piece of the wing. Then I'll start back over here and do this next piece of the wing. Then I'll probably do the body. And then I'll cross over, do this wing, jump to here, do the last wing. Then I'll have my whole butterfly outlined in blue. Okay, so that's what I'm going to start working on now. Okay, so now you can see, let me get this sorted. We've got our piece here. Or you can see I've come around this, right, up to the top here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump, because I want to follow the way that these lines move, right? So this wing here should actually start from the bottom and flow up and around, right? I shouldn't turn this corner and try and make this now happen, right? You got to follow those lines. It's all part of the texture. So what I need to do here for that is I'm going to dive back down here at the end of my line, pull all my slack through. So now I'm underneath my piece, right? And then what I'm going to do is pop back up right on the new line where I'm going to start. Go through a couple times. There we go. So I'm going to pop back up here at my new line, right? So there I am. Pop back through, pull all my slack. Sometimes they get tangled underneath. There we go. So now I'm sticking out my new line here. So I can again, I've got a nice big long straightaway, so I'm going to grab 4 beads here. I typically would probably even grab 5 or 6, but for us right now I'm just going to keep it simple. So here we are. Yeah, I'll maybe bring this down. So this is that. There are my beads. I steer them into the line exactly where I want them. Tack down at the end of those 4. I pull all my slack through. There's my new 4 beads. All I need to do now is just come up between beads 1 and 2, as we always do, right on the line. Important that you pop back up on your actual line, otherwise it'll skew your beads and make them go crooked. There we go. Then I go through my last 3 beads here. You can see those. Through my 3. Pull all that slack through. The little thumb roll, like so. There we go. Those new beads are nice and snug on there. So now I'm going to continue and go around this piece all the way back to my butterfly body. I'll go around the body, and then I'll start on the other side and do this wing, and then this wing, right? And then that'll finish off my butterfly outline. Okay. Okay, so here we go. I've done this outline. Now what I'll tell you is I had to learn this the hard way, as I usually do, being that I do this just kind of live and figure these new designs out as I go. But you can see the body here is essentially 2 beads wide. And the trick is, I followed exactly on one side of the line, and then the other side of the line almost was a little bit too far away, so I had to squeeze them back together to kind of make it seamless. And at the top where it opens up, there is a little bit of space. I had to squeeze a couple beads in there. And what will happen is when I fill this on either side, they will squeeze those beads together and they will be full. Right, so that will get squeezed together and you won't be able to see the gaps, but it's better to bead it in such a way that you don't even have to think about that. So what I would suggest is do your body, right, where you're beading those 2 lines just inside, side by side, just inside the line, so that it's only exactly 2 beads wide. Picture the body being 2 rows. And I think if you do it like that and let one of those go a little longer, and that'll give you a tail at the bottom. Right, I went to 1 bead right at the end, right, so single bead at the bottom for this, the tail part. So give that a try. That's something that's, you know, it's tough to do those little sections where it's almost, it's not 3 beads, but it's barely 2. It's kind of, you have to play with it, right? So try that, and good luck with that, right? But now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to, on the outside of each of these wings, I'm going to go around the outside here, just on that outside bit of each of these wing pieces, and you know, these over here too along the edges, and I'm going to double up the purple edging, or like the purple line work around the outside, just around the outside. So that'll give like a double, like thickened exterior outline, and then we're going to fill each one of these with white after that. And what that's going to do, why I'm doubling up those outsides, is because the edging, the edge work on the outside of this piece is going to be white. So I don't want white and then just 1 line of purple and then right into a white fill. It's going to look too washed out. So doubling up that outside edge, A, will look more like a butterfly because they often have those thick kind of deep bands at the outside edge of their wings. So it'll give it some likeness, right, to real life, but also it'll provide a bit of a dark color break between the white edging, then the dark, then the white fill, okay? So I'm going to do that right now and I'll show you what that looks like after. Okay, so that just wraps up our outline of the butterfly here. You can see I've went around and doubled up just the ends of each of these wings. I did that inside the line, so I added that second line inside. I went on the inside and added those. So that is now finished. And I'm going to work now on filling that with our white. So I'm going to fill that up with our pearlescent white. For these wings, I'm going to do long lines running from the body out towards the wingtips for these top wing pieces. And then for the bottom ones, I'm likely going to come out and do like little half moons of beads. So as I start to fill that, I'll show you what that looks like, and it'll give us two different textures here as well, which look really cool. So that's what I'm going to work on next, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so here we are. I'll try and show you this. Here is the fill on the wings. You can see I've done like this kind of rainbow style pattern as far as like the shape, right? These long bent lines, right? And there's a couple aspects that didn't end up turning out perfect. Right here, right, I ended up putting white in there because it just didn't connect perfectly when I lined it out at first. So I would definitely say do your little body first and outline it that way, and then run it out into the wing on either side so that you don't get this little break like I have here. But besides that, it came out pretty clean. So now I'm going to move on and I'm going to start outlining this flower up here, which I'm going to be doing in our dark orange. So dark orange is going to be the outline for this top flower, and we'll be filling it with yellow. So I'm going to start that outlining process now, and I'll check in with you once that's done. Okay, so here we go. I jumped the gun a little bit and I went right through and started filling the piece out a little bit. But here you can see what we're looking at here, right? So you can see that I did the outlining in that darker orange, right? And then the inside, you can see here I did straight lines up, and I gave it like a really nice texture, which I like. And then for this circular round piece here, like the middle petal, right, I kind of went with like the loop pattern where it loops around like that. And that seemed to have really filled that quite well also. So here's what we're looking at as far as the actual beading patterns, and like the texture and the directions of the beading are looking like that. So up next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this bottom flower, right? It's the last thing we have to do. And I'm going to do it in two tones with a pink and a red. We have a nice colorful piece here. It's going to be really traditional and very cool. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to do this bottom in pink and red, and I'll show you what that looks like when we get a little bit further. Okay? Okay, so here is the beading of the bottom so you can get a good look at it. That first little interior circle, just 2 and then 3 beads fit there quite well in red. Then I moved to the pink for that central band. Right, so I got that pink there, there's a little break in that color. And then I just did all red with no outlining for the rest of those petals at the bottom. It's kind of a traditional thing to do, to just have totally full color with no outline on some aspects of the piece. Right, so here's what it looks like. And then obviously I just cut it out, right? That's something that you want to cut it as close as you can without potentially catching any of your stitches on the back side. So you need to be careful on the angle of your scissors. If you cut in such a way where your angle's coming in diagonally and you're going to maybe snip off your corners, you might accidentally cut some of your stitching. Then your beads will fall loose and you'll be hating life because you have to go back in and fix that. So that's kind of a hard thing. So be careful when you're cutting out. You want to get as close as you can, that you kind of get rid of that obvious white like the stabilizer. You want to get rid of as much of that as you can, but not so much that you cut a stitch. But that's what that looks like here, so you can kind of see our project. Okay, so after cutting that out, the next things that we're going to be doing is getting into edging, where I'm going to be putting a backing on this, as well as affixing my my brooch hardware is going to go sandwiched in between this stabilizer and the leather backing, and it'll be sandwiched inside, and only the little brooch pin aspect will stick out the back of that that leather. So that's what we're going to be doing up next. So stay tuned. Okay, so what we've done here now is I've jumped forward a couple steps, but I did that so that I can kind of show it to you all in one shot. A little bit tedious to kind of watch me do this, but I'll explain to you exactly what I got up to here. So here's the piece. Obviously, the beading on the face is finished now. So what we had to do next is put on our leather backing, right? So I like to put the fuzzy side against your stitching so that the smooth, shiny side is out, right? You can see a bit of the texture there, that smooth, shiny outside, fuzzy inside, right? That holds glue a lot better. And then this is a lot smoother to the touch, right? It stays cleaner. So what I did here, okay, and this is important, is because we need to attach our hardware, right, our little brooch hardware, in between our beaded piece and the leather backing. So what I did was I lined up my leather onto the back, and what I did was I glued about maybe 2/3 of it, a little over half, right? So that's kind of where I glued to. So I glued all the bottom until about that point. Pressed it down nice and solid, let it hang out for a handful of minutes for the glue to kind of bind up. And then I cut the whole thing out, right? So I cut it all out so you can see, cut out to shape with this on the back, right? The leather backing, but the top flap is open. All right, this is important because that's where we're going to put our little piece of hardware. So what I did then is I put my little piece of hardware on there and I lined it up exactly where I wanted it to be. So I want it to sit about there. You don't want it way at the top, but you don't want it in the middle either, because if it's in the middle then the piece is sort of teeter-tottery. You want it so that when you wear it as a brooch, right, it hangs. So I chose almost in line with the top of the butterfly wings. Almost pick a line from one side to the other here at the top of those wings, and that's where my brooch is going to be. So then what I did is I just grabbed one side, right, once you've got it right in place. I grabbed one side, pulled part back, and made a little dot with a pen. Then I pulled the other side back, made a little dot just underneath with the pen. So now I have two dots in line with my either edge of the brooch hardware, right? Because we've got this nice flat back to it, right, that's thin. But then we've got one edge of hardware and then the other edge. And those we need to cut two little holes so they can pop through, okay? So what I'm going to do now is, you can be a little bit careful here, but we've got those two holes, or the two little dots. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little snip. I'm going to make a little snip on either one. So I'm going to fold up, I'm going to pinch my leather a bit so that it makes like a fold, kind of like that. And then I'm going to do a little snip right on my dot. Now this might require a couple snips, where you make one, you try to insert your hardware, you realize, oh, it's not quite big enough, I need to cut that again. But you made the first two, and then we'll see how it works out, right? So the one side will be very easy because all you got to do is get this little pin through and then this tiny little skinny part. But over here, we've got a much bigger clasp that we need to fit through. So let's see how we manage. So the little snip I made got that piece of hardware through no problem, the pin side. And then we'll see what happens over here on that bigger clasp. And I can already tell it's not nearly big enough. So that's why we make our little snip a little bigger and see how we manage. So I just snipped it a little further, and let's see if it'll go through now. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can see now that it's organized on the back here. There she be, right? There's the two pieces of hardware sticking out, right? You can trim up the little edges if you don't like those little fluffies that kind of show once you make your snips. You can trim that up if you really want to make it super clean. But otherwise, that's it. She's through. Right, there we are. And now that that's done, you can peel this back again, put your glue, right, which I'm going to throw in here. You can glue the rest of your piece. Right, so put that glue under there, smear it all around. And then once you've got that organized, now you can close your piece up, squeeze your glue together, and there it is. She's ready to go. So I'm going to now let that sit for a little bit. Right, there it is. Look at that. It's all in there. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to edge my piece next. So that'll be our next clip. Okay, so we're ready to edge now. Our piece is all dry and ready to go. So what we need to do is, to begin, you're going to set up a needle exactly like you have, with a short end and a long end, and then your long end is going to be tied with a surgeon's knot, like a triple knot, and the other one's left open, the short end, right? So regular needle setup, and now what we're going to do is run beads all on the edging of this, and we're going to use our pearly white color that is inside these wings for that, okay? So the first thing you need to do is find the place to start, and what you usually look for is a spot where it typically happens, always somewhere, just even if by accident, that there's a spot where the leather kind of pulls away from the stabilizer on the edge, and that's cool because you want that, because that's going to be the place where we start with. Okay, so what you're going to do is, and this is an important thing too, hold your piece of beading so that the beads are facing you, right? So I'm holding it so the beads are facing me, and you want to edge in the direction, like, so I'm left-handed, so I'm holding my needle in my left hand, the beads facing me. You want to go in the direction in which your needle faces in that hand, right? Because if you try and bead it the opposite direction, you're going to have to like be going backwards through the beads, and it's going to be super frustrating. So sort that right out, that if you have the beads facing you, if you're left-handed, you're going to go clockwise, And if you're right-handed, you would go counterclockwise. So that's an important thing to note. Otherwise, take this little opening here in our leather, and what you're going to do is come in from behind. You're going to go on a shallow angle, so I'm going in quite a bit away from the edge, right? I'm going in on a light angle so that my needle pops out. You can see here, I've gone in on a really shallow angle, far back onto the stabilizer, and my needle is popping out right on the edge of the beadwork, right? So that's what it should look like when you come in. Look at that angle. So now I pull all of my slack through, and then what I've done now is my knot is now hidden well inside my piece, right? So now when I close that flap and bead it in, there will be no visible knot. So that's the idea there, okay? So now my thread is sticking out here, right at the top. What I need to do is pick up one bead. There are many different ways to edge. You'll see like all these like pyramid stacking schemes and like all these little fringy kind of edges. We're going to go with the most simple one, because if you can nail that, moving to anything else is not a big deal. So we picked up one single bead. You're going to slide it all the way down. The first one's a little bit different because you have to get it started, and then it's the exact same technique all the way around. So now that I've got that one little bead here on the edge, you can see it just sitting there. What I'm now going to do is come back around and go through my leather and my stabilizer on a light angle just behind that bead. So you can see now, see if I can make this obvious to you because it's a bit hard to explain. I've come back in through my leather, right? You can see I'm coming from the back on an angle, right? So that I get some meat on that leather. And I'm popping out just behind, right? Because I'm going this way, right? So I'm popping out just behind my bead, right? So that's just behind my bead. I'm going to pull my slack through now. This becomes a nice thing if you've got a little pair of rounded tip kind of beading pliers, because sometimes it's hard to pull through the leather. Pull all that slack through, and now you're going to have a bead that's sort of sitting on the edge like this. You can see it's just kind of hanging out there, right? There it is, just chilling. So what we need to do is straighten that, that bead out by going through it. So what I'm going to do is actually go through the bead. You can see I'm actually going through it right now. I'm inside it. And the idea here is that, again, remember, I'm left-handed, right? So I'm always going in the same direction. I'm beading clockwise. If you're right-handed, you'd be going counterclockwise. Always the beadwork facing you. So I'm going to go grab my bead and turn it so that it's sort of stacked this way, right? And then I'm going to pull my slack through. Give it always a little tug just to tighten it up. And now my bead is hanging out, set up pretty well on the edge. Right, there it is. Now my string is coming out the end of my bead and I'm free to pick up a new one. So now from this point forth that we've actually got our beadwork started, like our edging started, it's a little bit easier. Now all I do is I'm going to come in from the through the stabilizer and through the leather, right? So you can see now I'm coming in that I've started. I'm going through the stabilizer on a light angle so that I grab a little bit of that leather on the back, right? And I've got a bead on my string, right? And now I can pull that through. And then what you're going to have is your bead laying there, kind of crooked beside the one that you really want. I'm just going to change my focus a little bit here. There we go. So you can see my bead is just kind of laying there, kind of crooked. So what I need to do again is come in behind that bead, right, and through it. You can see I've gone through it, right, always going in the direction that you're working. Pull all the slack through, and then always giving a little tug and a little jerk around just to kind of straighten that bead out and to tighten it. So now I've got two beads sitting side by side quite nicely. And the more beads you tack down, the more sturdy they become because you sort of create this rigidness between them. So now again, my thread's sticking out this bead, right? It's out here and ready to pick up another one. So again, I just picked up another bead, slide it down the string a little bit, and then I come in on an angle just in front of that bead I just put down, right? So again, coming through on this kind of light little angle here, just in front. You can see I'm only maybe a millimeter, barely even a bead's width in front of the one I just put down. Pull my slack through all the way. Then my bead's laying there kind of all crooked, right? You can see it's well out of place. But then I'm going to pick it up with my needle, straighten it out so that it's stacked the same way that all my other beads are, right? I'm inside it. Pull my slack through, give her a little tug and a tighten, and then there we go. You can start seeing now. Look at those beads sitting perfectly beside each other, nice and close, no gaps. And actually, the more beads you put down, the better it gets because they sort of use each other for structure. So I'm going to essentially be making like a tight little zipper kind of. It should feel like a zipper all the way around, holding your stabilizer and your leather sandwiched together. Okay, so I'm going to continue working on this, and then I'll check in with you after, and I'll show you when I'm kind of halfway done, so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so have a good look here. I'll try and get that close enough to be able to see. So I've almost completely finished outlining this and edging it. You can see that kind of border it gives, which is super nice. And it seams up that edge, right, so that you can't really see where those two pieces of fabric meet. Now, where we're at here too is that we're at the end, right, where you can see that there's a gap for one bead left to go in there, right? One bead left. So I'll show you how to wrap this thing up. So I'll scoop up my last bead. Get it on there. And I'm going to do just like I've been doing, where I go in just right into that gap through both the pieces of fabric on a little angle, right? Just like we've been doing. Biting into a little bit of that leather. I'm going to pull my thread through, just like so. I'm going to straighten out my bead and put my needle through it like I normally would, except what I'm going to do here is I'm going to back my needle up a bit and I'm going to grab the next bead beside it, right? So actually the first bead I put down. So you can see now I'm not only just going through the bead I just put down, but I'm actually going to go through that one beside it, or the first bead I put in. So now when I pull through both those beads, what it actually does is it now ties the first bead to the last bead and they're now connected, right? Which is pretty awesome. Now it's seamless. I still have this tie here though, I still have my thread. So what I do now is, what's nice is actually there's a bit of, you can see I've ended here beside my, not very far from my hardware. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plunge my needle in the top, going in on a very shallow angle, and I'm going to do it so that I pop out just beside my hardware, and I'll tie my knot off right there. So I'll show you what that looks like. This might take a kind of try or two to get the angle right. It can be a little bit hard to get it just right. So I'm going to give it a whirl here. I'm going to go in just beside that bead I just put in, and I'm going to come out with my knot just right beside my hardware. There's stuff there anyway, right? No biggie to have one more thing there. Okay, so you can see now I went through on a light angle, right, like a very shallow angle, and I've come through right here. Right, so that's my angle I went through on, right beside where my thread goes through, down like that. And now it can be nice to use your pliers for this and pull that through. It can be a little bit tough to get through all that. But there we go. I can pull that all the way through. Boom. Okay, so now my thread's gone here at the edge, right? Can't see it. If I flip my piece over, here's my thread coming through right there. Right, so now I can take my needle off, and then I'm going to do my surgeon's knot again, right? Which is my, you got your little loop, right? 1, 2, 3, right? So that's your 1, 2, 3 passes around your loop. And then what I do here is to get that knot, and this is how you tie off your pieces as well when you want to start a new thread, is I create like almost like a coat hanger shape with my hands, where I've got my fingers here, the other hand I've got that. It brings your knot right down against the leather. Then you can put a nail on it, holding my knot. Now I can pull, 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 and boom, my triple knot ends up right at the leather. I can clip off my excess. I'm just gonna cut that off. And there we go. So there's our piece, ready to rock. Right, totally edged. You can see you want those edging beads to be nice and close to each other. It makes like a zipper finish. And then when you flip it around, that's what my back looks like. The only visible sign of any type of work is that one tiny little knot which we hide right up against the hardware. And there it is, ready to go.